everybody again, and welcome to this exclusive ICG Mistika 10 English session this time. Thank you all for joining us, obviously despite the challenging situation that everybody is facing at the moment. First, many thanks to Alexander and Ilya from ICG for making this event possible. We are very, very excited to be able to show Mistika 10 to your community today, so thank you very much again. So together with me from SGO is also Melanie Diaz from the marketing department and Jose Luis Sacha, our regional sales manager. So Jose Luis, do you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah, but only a couple. Well, hi everybody. Good evening and perhaps good night in Moscow, or good morning around the world. No, depends on where you are at this moment. It's really incredible to have this kind of session. I hope everybody, is keeping safe. As like Eva was saying, it's difficult moments for everybody, and I think that this kind of the moments were happening, we don't know when they're gonna be at the end, you know. So hope everybody will keep safe in the future and we continue with our activities. Thanks, Alexander, Alex, for the ICG collaboration. I hope it's the first time we've done this kind of a webinar. I hope in the future we can do more specific, perhaps, with the things that people or colorists can ask or can go more deeply inside. And for the people who doesn't know who is SGO, let me say that's a company that was born more than 25 years ago, and that Mistika was developed more than 20 years ago. So it's not a new software. It's something that was done in the past. We continue improving. That has been used in a lot of independent and blockbuster feature films, a lot of TV series, a lot of documentaries, and until 2 years ago, it was only based in Linux. That's called Mistika Ultima. Now we are based on Mac and Windows. That's Mistika Boutique, because we thought at the end that people has to have all the possibilities to work with, you know? And that came also with something new from 2 years ago. That was the pay per use, or when we say the subscription, that you will use the software whenever you want it, not an investment mode, not because you're obliged to. You will only use it when you need to. Sure. And finally, I would say that be free to make all the questions, to make all the things you may need to know. That perhaps we don't have any much time here in 1 hour. If you need more information, please feel free to mail us and to let us know what do you need. Okay, so well, I'm going to not waste more time, and hoping that Adrian can start right now. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you very much, Jose Luis, for this nice presentation and nice introduction to Mistika, actually. So just maybe a small comment before we dig into the presentation. Melanie has a good news for you, right, Melanie?
Yes, absolutely. All ICG members are entitled to an exclusive offer of 50% discount for Mistika Boutique. So this promotion is valid for all editions. This means subscription plans and single-use licenses.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Melanie will be pasting the instructions on how you can get this discount into the chat. So I can see that Adrian joined us. We were waiting for the old video to get codified. So the objective of today's session, as said before, is to introduce you the most exciting and unique features of Mistika 10. Today's presentation will be carried out by Mistika Boutique Product Manager, Adrian Gonzalez. So Adri, what do you plan to show us today?
Well, today we're going to see 3 or 4 of the most unique aspects of Mistika. Is the time and space, especially the grading. We're going to focus quite a lot on the grading, how how to combine grading with VFX, and then we will talk about managing versions, etc., in the same canvas, which is a very unique approach of that kind of workflow.
All right, that sounds like a good plan. So at the end of the session, hopefully we'll get some time to answer your questions. So if you have any questions during the session, you can place them in the Q&A panel you can see in the lower tab of the Zoom window. I would also recommend you to make your window full screen so you can see better all the operations that Adrian will be performing. Okay, so why don't we start with one of Mistica's most differentiating features, the time space. Could you please explain us how the timeline concept works in Mistika?
Sure. So here we have the time space of Mistika. As you can see, it's really, really unique. It doesn't have video tracks or audio tracks. Is basically an empty canvas, an empty space, infinite space, in fact, where you can just put anything anywhere. So for example, if we go to here, I can just take my whole edition or my whole project, like I have in here, and I can always duplicate it. I can move it wherever I want. I can make like several versions of the same shot by just duplicating several times. I can just manage all my versions in the same space and in a really visual way. If I apply any effect on top, like for example, a color grade and a denoise and a framing, for example, I can always take all these effects that I'm applying in this particular shot, copy, paste, and manage it in a really simple way. So the fact that the whole software works in this space, everything is integrated in this space. I can manage here visual effects with grading, with finishing adjustments, with editing as well. Everything in just one canvas makes the post-production workflow much more efficient than just jumping between different environments for every particular task that you need to do. In here, you can manage everything from this one space. And in this presentation, we're going to see some of the functionalities related with this freedom. This is the kind of software Mistika Boutique don't guide your job. You basically have totally freedom and you have an interface that is completely flexible to adjust your workflow and to manage your project in the way that you want. So we are going to see in this presentation how we manage it using the time space as the main tool for our post-production tasks.
All right, that's great. But I think that one of the most important things of Mistika 10 is obviously the completely redesigned color user interface. Can you take us through the toolset and show us how we can achieve greater control in the color grading processes?
Sure. So we're going to take a couple of shots in here to show it. I'm going to start with this one, right? Let me disable a little bit my my scopes, so I have a cleaner view of my visual editor. This is the visual editor, okay? So the interface in Mistika is split in two. We have the time space and the visual editor. If you work with two monitors, you can have both interface opens at the same time. So we always recommend to have two monitors. But in this particular case, we're working in just one. So we switch between them, and we're going to switch between those during the whole presentation. Right, so as Eva said, we with Mistika 10, we started a new line of development by redesigning the color grade toolset. And in this particular case, let me add color grades on top of all of my clips. I'm going to select all of them, just goes to effects. And as you can see, the color grade is just one effect in the whole pool of effects of Mistika. So this is an example of how powerful the system is. The color grade is just one effect in this whole library. So by just clicking the color grade, I apply a color grade on top of my shots. And if we go to here, we have now the color grade open there. The main, the main differential point compared with other color grading tool sets is the fact, and you can see that in a very obvious way, but just clicking in the different tools, is that you have more tools than anyone else. Basically, Mistika have a full tool set for color grading. There is no situation that you cannot address or manage with our color grading tool. And with this redesign, what we have done, because that was the complexity, is we have too many tools, so we needed to organize them in a way that they are really simple to use, very accessible, very visual as well. So it's easy to use them because they're pretty obvious. We have graphics everywhere. The pivots are something that you can manage interactively. So everything needs to be done in a simple way. It needs to be operated in a simple way, but it needs to keep the powerful that we have that we always had with our color toolset. All right. So the best way to show the power of this toolset is working with it in a real scenario. All right. So we have this shot in here, and this shot that we can see is pretty similar to this one. They are going to share the color. So basically, we're going to use this kind of shots that are part of the same sequence. This is like a commercial spot. So and basically it's a sport commercial that mix different sports in the project. So we're going to focus on the running sequence. Okay, so we have like here like several shots of it. So we're going to start with this one because it's like the more general one. In here I have view of mostly all the parts that I need to cover in my grading. And the first thing I normally do is try to find my look. Because this is an sport commercial, one thing I'm going to do is to increase the saturation just to see the dominant colors in the shot. And they look very warm, so I'm going to move them to the cold part of the color spectrum, all right? So I'm going to open here histogram, all right, to see, and we can see the range in here. And first thing I'm going to do is to contrast my image, all right? I don't care too much if some values go below or beyond the 0 or the 100 level, because I can always recover them later. Okay, so I'm going just to increase the value there, maybe add a little bit of highlights there, something like that, and then move the gamma, right? Of course, because we are in primary, every time that we move the rings in here, we are changing the saturation of my shot, right? So, and once I've just changed the leaf gum gain, the saturation has increased, so we can always decrease it from here. You want to decrease it. I don't want a really saturated shot for now, so I'm going to keep it low. And as I said, I don't want this kind of warm color in my shot, so I wanted to move it to a more colder area of the color range. So I have several ways to do it. That's pretty normal in Mistika. You always have several ways to do the same task. We can use the temperature and tint. We can use the printer steps that allows us to, for example, decrease the red value by points. All right. So this is a really interesting tool to make quick adjustments from the look perspective of the shot. In my particular case, I'm going to use these two buttons here, especially this one, which is the offset button. And this basically changes the behavior of the primaries. As you can see, we have leaf gamma gain. The moment that I press it, it goes to leaf offset, gamma, and gain offset. And this affects as well the panels. In the previous presentation, we mentioned that, and I wanted to mention again, we support all the tangent panels and the precision panels, and all of them can be remapped by you, okay? So we offer a default mapping that is really good, but if you need to remap any functionality, you can do it. Okay, so at the moment when I push this button, when I select it, the trackball in my panels change the behavior as well. So now we have lift offset and gain offset. The moment that I control, for example, the trackball here to move the color to a blue, I'm moving as well the lift. As you can see, I'm going to push it so you can see it clearly, all right? So, but I'm just going to make a small adjustment, like move it to here or something like that, right? Because I wanted to move it to a more cold area again, right? Now, the problem right now is every time that I make a change in primary, it will affect the saturation. So it's pretty common to make like your first adjustment in primary and then jump to the bands panel, because the primary works in RGB and bands works in hue, saturation, and luma. So every time that I control something, and the best way to show it is creating a new vector, right? The color grade works by vectors. You can create any amount of vectors or layers here. If we go to the vector scope, we can see I'm going to zoom in. If I change something here, as you can see, I'm changing the saturation of the shot because it's the normal behavior of the primaries. But in bands, this doesn't affect the saturation. So I can control the luminance in a much better way. In fact, if we want to control the luminance, only the luminance, okay, not affecting the chroma or the saturation, with all the tools that we have in here, we're only using bands, but let's say that we don't want to be restricted to bands. I can enable here luminance. And now any change, even in the trackball, as you can see, won't affect the saturation and the color of my shot. But if I go to the overlap, this will change the luminance in a different way. So I can control the light of my shot in a really nice way using not only bands, but now I can even use primary for that because I'm just working on the luminance of my shot without affecting the overall look of the clip, all right? So let's say that we want this kind of approach. Now, I would like to put the ground maybe a more reddish. I want to lift those colors. So I'm going to create another layer. Go to the fixed vectors, and here we have several tools to do it. Maybe the most obvious way to do it is using the sliders here. Now, the problem is if I saturate the red, I will saturate out as well the woman here running, and I want to only select the ground in there. So I'm going to create first a key in here, a qualifier, all right? So I'm going to click, I'm going to enable the view. I'm going to click in the red. So in this, we'll move the selection close to the reds. I just need to rotate a little bit. And instead of selecting in a simple way all the pixels, I'm going to enable just the proportional to keep all the details and all the shadows in my shot. Now with this control, I can as well control the saturation to isolate better the ground in there and even contrast my result using this curve, all right? So once I have it, I can just blur a little bit and I have all those, all that pretty well selected without affecting the main character in my shot, all right? So now I can just go to fixed. And now here, I can just move it maybe to something more yellowish and increase the red colors to something like that, right? So if we disable or enable, we can see the small difference. Now there is another way to do it, which is basically using the new feature in Mistika 10.1, which is the hexagon. And this is a really cool way to do it because it's really interactive, it's really simple to use, and it's really visual because you see in a clear way the changes that you're doing. So if we increase this red, I'm just increasing the saturation, but I can always move it to any other value. So for example, I can put it in blue, move it to cyan, green, yellow, etc. So I can just push it a little bit further to go to the red and have a color that is closer to what I want, right? Okay, so let's say that we have now my shot graded. Now I want to copy this shot in another clip, for example, this one, by just making double click, I get it. Now the problem is this shot has stronger shadows, so I need to recover those shadows, or maybe push a little bit those highlights to go to 100. Okay, so I'm going to add two more layers for that. The first layer is going to be for the highlights. So I'm going to go to my primary, then change the offset. Oh, sorry, I have the offset open. Although that change is nice. So I'm going to leave it there and then increase the soft clip to go to the 100 level. And now I'm going to recover here. Let's say that I'm going to recover here those shadows to be in legal values. Okay, so I'm going to create another layer. And for that, I'm going to use the pivots that I have in here, which is a really nice way to work to select specific areas in your color range. So I'm going to lower my soft clip, I'm going to lower my white, and now I'm going to work only in this area here that I'm selecting, all right? So the rest of the range is going to keep intact. I'm going to just work in the shadows area of my shot. To keep everything intact, I'm going to enable the knee soft value, which is basically like a fixed pivot. So at this point, the curve here won't move. Okay, so now I can just with the lift recover that. And as you can see, I'm not affecting anything else in the range. I'm just controlling the shadows in the way that I want. If I increase this pivot, I will affect more or less of my shot. So as well, it can be a dynamic change that I can do with the pivot itself. All right, I'm going just to apply some softness. So the transition between this area and this is softer. I'm going to increase it to 20 or 30 maybe. And there you go. And now we have it. Now we can just go to another shot that are similar, just copy and paste, and there we go. This looks nice. And we have this last shot for this sequence. So I'm going to bring the color correction. We see that some values are above the 100 level. So with this control that we have here in the soft clip, I can just move the soft clip range in here and just go with the soft clip down. So I'm basically using the same control that I used in this shot for controlling the whites. I'm using it here to recover those whites. At the same time, I'm going to maybe decrease the gamma here and the lift. And if I want to make maybe more fine adjustments or specific adjustments in some areas, I can always go to my curves panel. All right, I'm going to increase the curves panel to make it bigger and to control it better. And I can make, for example, some kind of S curve here to change the overall result. I don't want to saturate it too much, so I will keep it that way maybe. Okay, I can always go to here to the saturation and just make a small change in saturation, some controlling there. So now we have a result that is relatively close to it in a really quick way. Okay, so this is an example of how easy it is to manage color with the new color grading toolset. As you can see, all the tools are here available from this panel here. Everything is very visual. Every panel can be resized. You can just adjust it as you want to control it better. You can combine primary with bands, with fixed, with curves in the way that you want, or create several layers to control every tool. So as Eva said, it's a really powerful tool, and this redesign will help especially the new users when it starts working with Mistika.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I really like how all the tools are looking. They look pretty simple to use, which I think is the most important when you find yourself using a new software. So, but now I would like to speak a little bit more about the fact that Mistika allows seamless integration of color with special effects. So why don't we go into that direction now?
All right, we have here a shot that is really typical in visual effects. When we are talking about visual effects, we're talking about specific formats, specific tools, etc., that you need to bring into your timeline with your grading project. All right. Normally, visual effects and grading, or at least in the last few years, needs to communicate using one specific format. EXR is right now the standard format, and the great thing of the EXR is that you can save multiple layers inside the EXR to be used later during the grading. In this particular case, we have a very special EXR, which is EXR created by CGI, so it's a 3D EXR. To load the RGB layer, I need to load a layer root and select the RGB layer. So we have this layer. Of course, when we talk about visual effects, normally the communication between the visual effects department and the grading department is done in linear light. So we need to make a color transformation. So I'm going to put here on top the unicolor. And the unicolor is our color management. And it's really, really flexible because you can apply it only in one shot, on several shots, on in your whole timeline, in the way that you want. In this particular case, we're going to apply it only in this shot. So we go to the unicolor, and I'm going to transform from linear to, let's say, gamma 2.4, all right? Because at the end, we're making this online, and the streaming is much easier to see if we put it in gamma 2.4, all right? So we have this shot. And this shot has, well, a very basic grading. It looks a bit washed out and too green, in my opinion. So first, we're going to make the grading in a quick way, and then we will jump to more specific effects to make the final finishing of this shot. All right. So I'm going to open a color grade on top again. First thing, I'm going to neutralize this kind of green looking and add a little bit of contrast. So lift, and to add contrast there. Maybe recovering those highlights, those small peaks. I'm going to increase the value so you can see it clearly. Those peaks in here, so I'm going to recover them, not too much, something like that. And then later maybe, yeah, something like that. All right, so just add a little bit of contrast in my image. There you go. Now I'm going to move the overall color to a completely different range. So I'm going to again enable the offset and just move maybe this to a more magenta or blue looking. So it looks cold as well. All right. So now I'm going to start with small adjustments. And the great thing of this shot is that it contains several layers of information. Right. So one of the layer, I'm going to add another vector here. One of the layer is the depth. So let's say that we want to change the color here at this point of the depth of the shot. All right. We can of course make a selection of red values, but it's not very efficient because at the end, we need to create a shape. We need to go to the qualifier, select the red values. Maybe not the best way to do it. Because if we go to here, to the multi-layer, I can enable here the depth. And I can enable the depth layer. And from here, let me disable the scope for a moment so you can see it clearly. I can just navigate to it. I'm going to increase the size so you can see what is happening. Basically, I'm moving during the depth of my shot. So I'm going to focus especially in that part that it was behind, just increase a little bit the softness, and there you go. Now we are focused only in there. So I can just go back to my primaries or maybe to my fixed vector, go to my hexagon, which is pretty cool for these kind of tools, and just maybe increase the saturation, move it maybe to more bluish, or let's see, yeah, bluish is fine. Sorry, yellowish is fine. There you go. Something like that, all right? Okay, so this has changed the overall look in there. All right, now let's say that we want to make something similar, but with the boat in here that we have in front. So I'm going to add another vector, go to my qualifier, and again, I'm going to use the depth layer, but in this particular case, I'm going to select the boat in there. So I'm going to enable again my highlight, move my depth control in here, increase the size maybe, and the softness a little bit. Okay, so we take the boat in there, and I'm going to change the color, for example, of those lights. I want to increase a little bit the saturation there and the luminance. So again, I go to my fixed vector, and let's say that the red, I want to move them to more magenta, increase the saturation, and of course, increase the luminance of the yellow and the red ones. So we can see the difference in there. And as you can see, I'm affecting, well, not only this selection here, but the reflection over the water, which of course are linked with the light that is being used in the boat. And I'm going to make the same thing. I can even duplicate this layer. And in this second one, instead of working with the red ones, I can just work with the blue ones. And as you can see, I can just move them wherever I want. So let's put it in more cyan and maybe increase a little bit the luminance as well to create something like that, all right? So as you can see, we are just changing the overall look of the boat in there. And well, it works really well during the whole sequence there. All right. Okay. So one more thing that we can do at the end, and it's something that I like to do sometimes, is to use the blending modes to get different results, because the blending modes at the end creates contrast that you cannot make manually with the primary or with the bands because of the math of the color science that is behind it. So I'm going to take the vector 5 and then go to maybe soft light, and there you go. We get a nice contrast without making any other adjustment, just by blending one vector over the rest of my grading. I can just always go to the blend and increase the value of that contrast. In this particular case, I'm going to leave it in 100. All right, so we have this situation. Now let's say that we want to add visual effects on top of it. All right, so for that, I'm going to open my node graph, because we have a node graph as well, not only time and space. We have a node graph for compositing. You can use the time and space as well. I normally use the time and space, in fact, but I think it's interesting to show the node graph as well. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is to create, for example, enhance effect. And the enhance add this kind of glow over all my shots, but I want to apply it only in the highlights area. So how can I apply those in the highlights area? I need to select it to select them before, and I'm going to use the color grade for that. So I'm going to create another layer here just to select those highlights. Okay, so something like that. You can see. So I'm just selecting the highlights there, and I'm going to export this selection as an alpha. So now my shot has this alpha, which allows me to combine and composite over anything I want, right? So I'm going to duplicate this shot. Sorry, not this one. I want to duplicate, sorry. There you go. I'm going to, in this particular case, I'm going to disable this alpha because I want to use it only as a background. And I'm going to combine this one with with this kind of glow with this one with the background. So I'm going to put a comp3D on top and just combine. And the comp3D is basically an a space, a 3D space where I can just manage every layer in an independent way. So I can, for example, move, you see my highlights. This is my highlights with the glow. And I'm just compositing these highlights over my background, which is the image. And as you can see, I'm using the whole time basically the time space here, as you can see, right? So I'm going to make this smaller. So I can manage color grading and visual effects in the same space. As a final adjustment, for example, I can add a flare effects. And for example, put the flare effects that comes from here, disable the rainbow there, and then maybe with the flares, lower the intensity, and the ring maybe make it a bit smaller, for example, right? With the slower decay. Oh, there you go. So basically, I'm now adding the flare effects on top of my shot with my glow effect. Everything composed and graded in the same space, which is Mistica's timelines. The fact that I can combine all those effects together in the same canvas allows me to go at any moment to the grading part, make any adjustment in the grading, and everything will be adapted because it's a non-destructive workflow. I don't need to go to the VFX department and say, okay, we need to change that and then adapt my grading to the new version of the compositing. Everything is managed in the same space and with the same media in the same canvas. It's really, really efficient at the end for working with grading and visual effects.
Absolutely, that was pretty cool, Adrian. Thank you very much. But how about versioning? This is also a very important aspect, you know, especially now when because of the delivery standards that are so demanding. How do you manage different versions? And for example, how do you create different looks for the client in Mistika?
All right, so we have several ways to do that. Basically, the standard way to do it is using our history system, which is basically this one. Well, it's loading the icons right now. There you go. All right, so we have the shot in there. Let's say that we want to create another look. So I'm going to create another vector. And I'm going to make a quick look with the offset, then move this to maybe a more warm effect. There you go. And I'm going to create a version of that. So go to here and I can create history. And as you can see, this creates one. I'm going to create another look by just moving maybe to more greenish. And again, create history. So I have here two versions. So I can just go to bring one, bring two, bring one, bring two. So basically I can create like several versions, not only per grade, but even per effect. So for example, in the previous case that we had with the flare effects, in here, let's say that I want to change, for example, the number of vertex of the flare effects and just put something triangular. And I want to change the color as well of the flare to something more blue. Let me increase the saturation so we can see it clearly. There you go. So I'm going to create a new version for this. Create history, all right? Now I'm going to move it to maybe magenta, and I'm going to create another version. Create history. And of course, now we have the two of them as well for the effects. So every effect in Mistika can be adjusted and can be saved as a version. And you can manage all those versions with your color panels. And it doesn't matter if you are in the color grading tool, the panels will work as well with any effect. Now, there is another way to manage those versions, which I really like, which is using as well the time space. For me, it's really simple to just take this clip on here and just duplicate it and put it below. So my second version is in here. I can have here, for example, my second version there, and in this one, the first version. Let me load the first version, right? So we have one and two, the two, sorry, this is the second version, this is the first one. So I can just switch between them, compare, make any adjustments. And when I want, when I prefer one, I can just delete the other one that I don't like and just keep the good one in my timeline. Another way to do it as well is just creating another color grade on top to manage those versions. And this is pretty common in colorist, in Mistika Colorist. They normally have like a master track or a master layer for the colorist grading, and then they add a secondary layer for the client's requests. So basically, they add all the client's requests in a second grading layer, so they can always manage and come back if they want to the original situation, which is the colorist original situation, which is at the end really, really flexible. Now, at the same time, we can manage like several outputs in the same stack or in the same project in a really clean and efficient way here. So let's say that, for example, we want to deliver this in P3. Okay, so this is we're grading this. So let's say that this is a gamma 2.4 and 709, and we want to move to P3 DCI and gamma 2.6. So we have one delivery there. If we want, for example, to manage another delivery for visual effects, which again is normally in linear light, we can make the same thing, like gamma 2.4 and rec 709 and transform to AP0, for example, and linear light. All right. So, well, it's linear right now. Okay. So I can just have like several outputs and just hide the output that I don't need when I need to render something. So I can just hide this, show the top one, or even disable and make a bypass by just bypass one or bypass the other one. Okay, so you can always disable the version that you don't want to use. As a final very powerful tool for managing versions is what happens, for example, when you have your master version in here, your master grading, and you need to adjust all your job to a new timeline or to a new editing, a new EDL, XML, AAF, whatever, a new version of your project. Well, let's say that, for example, we add in here some effects. I'm going to add them in a random way just to go faster. So let's say that we add some denoises in there. On top of them, some as well, some unicolors. Then maybe in here we want to add a sharpen node. I don't know. You are basically building your timeline. All right. I'm going to add as well title, whatever. So you can just add any amount of effects in here. Now you want to adapt all your work in here in the clips that we have in there. So I can just take all of them, copy, then select my target, and in here click in match and paste. And the match and paste is a really powerful tool that allows me to match all the job that I've done in a previous timeline or in a previous project to a new timeline or a new project. This particular case, I'm going to select real name. We can match by source path, by timecode range, by real name. You can enable the three of them. I think it will work fine with a real name. We can replace the effects in case that our target project has already effects, we can replace them, or append the new effects on top, keeping the original ones there without removing them. Do not replace is basically not applying the new effects. It's just for example, for adapting other media to a new timeline. And with the animation option, and this is important, you can ignore the animation and not copy the animation, keep the original position of the keyframes, or scale the animation to the new target. Normally, I click in keep original keyframes to keep the animation as it was in the original file. But anyway, because we don't have animation, I will leave it there. So we click in paste, and there you go. Automatically, all the adjustments have been done. And if you remember correctly, we make the grading on top of this shot. Well, there you go. We have the shot already graded. Of course, the shot that doesn't have a grade the grade is empty, so it's already there to start the grading. If for any reason there is a shot, which I don't think is the case, no. If there is a new shot, for example, in a secondary version, you will have this situation, like an empty shot without any effect. So you know visually again, and that's really, really important, the fact that you can control everything visually in your timeline, you will know automatically, okay, this shot is empty, this shot is new, I need to grade it by starting from the scratch, or just bringing the color correction from another shot that looks similar. So this is an approach, quick approach of how can you manage different versions, different shots, different outputs in the same timeline. As you can see, we are combining here different projects. We have the master project, a secondary project, and a visual effects project in there in the same space, and it's fine. I mean, the timeline in Mistika is color space agnostic, so you can combine any amount of color spaces. It's resolution agnostic, so you can combine any amount of resolutions, and it's frame rate agnostic, so you can combine as well any kind of frame rates. So again, it's a really, really powerful tool for any kind of post-production workflow.